Two men, both 52. Both just finished the same lunch: grilled chicken, white rice, a glass of water, and the quiet certainty that they're eating pretty well. One sits back down at his desk. The other walks outside for 10 minutes. By the time they reconvene an hour later, their metabolic profiles look like they belong to different species. The man who sat? His glucose peaked at 180 milligrams per deciliter and is still slowly descending. His pancreas spent the last hour firing insulin like a panicked air traffic controller trying to land 200 planes at once. The man who walked? His peak never cracked 140. His insulin barely had to show up. Here's where it gets interesting. That gap isn't genetics. It isn't supplements. It isn't a protocol that costs anything. It's 10 minutes of walking. But not just any walk. The exact 10 minutes matters. And most men over 40 are getting this completely wrong. A 2022 study in sports medicine found that 3 10-minute walks taken after meals reduced 24-hour blood glucose by 58%, more than a single 30-minute walk taken once per day. The standard advice, go for a walk sometime today, is not the same thing. Not even close. If your doctor has mentioned your A1C, your fasting glucose, or the phrase, let's keep an eye on this, this is the video. Postprandial glucose, the spike that follows every single meal, is now recognized as one of the strongest independent predictors of cardiovascular disease in men your age. Not your fasting number, the spike. I'm not a doctor, and this isn't medical advice. What I'm doing is showing you the mechanism, the one your body is running, whether you know about it or not. Stay to the end. There's a specific timing window we'll cover that most men miss entirely. And missing it is the difference between the walk doing something and the walk doing almost nothing. Your skeletal muscle makes up roughly 40% of your total body mass. Think of it as a massive underground reservoir with thousands of intake valves. When you're sitting, those valves are essentially closed. Glucose has to fight its way in through the insulin pathway. A locked door that requires the right key, proper signaling, functional receptors, and enough time for all of that to actually work. But here's the kicker. When muscle contracts, even at low intensity, it opens a completely separate set of valves. A transporter protein called GLUT4 migrates to the cell surface and begins pulling glucose directly out of your bloodstream. No insulin required. Your body treats insulin like a nuclear launch code, only activating under specific conditions and after a chain of molecular events. Muscle contraction is the emergency bypass that skips all of it. A 2018 review in Physiological Reviews confirmed that GLUT4 translocation during exercise is one of the most powerful acute glucose-lowering mechanisms in human physiology. The effect begins within minutes. It doesn't require you to be winded. It doesn't require a gym. It requires you to stop sitting. 10 minutes of walking after a meal activates this mechanism at exactly the right moment, when glucose from your food is actively flooding the bloodstream. Let me show you what's actually happening. You eat. Carbohydrates break down in the small intestine. Glucose enters your bloodstream in a wave that typically peaks somewhere between 30 and 90 minutes after the first bite. Your pancreas releases insulin to drive that glucose into cells. Effective, but slow. It has to be synthesized, released, travel through the bloodstream, and bind to receptors. By the time it's fully operational, the traffic has already backed up on the highway. Walking in that window, within 30 minutes of finishing your meal, is like opening a second freeway. Glucose that was building up gets rerouted immediately, through muscle, without waiting for insulin to manage the situation. A 2016 study in Diabetologia found that light-intensity walking, begun within 30 minutes after eating, reduced post-meal glucose spikes by 22% compared to sitting, while also reducing insulin demand proportionally. The men who waited 2 hours to take their walk, the spike had already happened. They were cleaning up a mess instead of preventing one. The window is 30 minutes post-meal. That is your target. Let's be precise, because vague advice is metabolically useless. You do not need to power walk. You do not need to sweat. A 2013 study in diabetes care found that even slow walking, around 2 miles per hour, produced meaningful reductions in post-meal glucose in adults with insulin resistance. Think of your muscles like a pump. They don't need high pressure. They just need to be running. 10 minutes is the minimum effective dose. It's enough to sustain GLUT4 activity through the active glucose absorption window without requiring you to rearrange your entire afternoon. Less than 5 minutes? The effect is marginal. More than 20? Perfectly fine. The glucose benefit just stops scaling proportionally after that point. Here's where it gets interesting again. 3 meals, 3 walks. That's the distribution strategy. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. 1 10-minute walk after each. 30 total minutes spread across the day. According to the Buffy et al. 2022. Sports Medicine. Paper, this approach outperformed the consolidated 30-minute session by 58%. Your body doesn't bank insulin-independent glucose uptake across a day. It's use it or lose it, meal by meal. Drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from? And what's the one thing about blood sugar management you wish someone had explained to you sooner? Postprandial glucose isn't just an hourly inconvenience. It accumulates invisibly. Your A1C is essentially a 90-day rolling average of glucose exposure. Imagine someone calculating your average driving speed by reviewing every single trip you took over 3 months. If you're spiking after every meal and no one's accounting for it, that average climbs quietly. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up on your next lab results. A 2001 study in diabetes care found that post-meal hyperglycemia was independently associated with cardiovascular mortality, even in men whose fasting glucose appeared completely normal. Normal fasting number, dangerous daily spikes. The morning blood draw is not telling your doctor the whole story. 3 10-minute walks per day, done consistently, begins reshaping that average within weeks. A 2019 study in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine found significant reductions in HbA1c in sedentary adults who adopted post-meal walking over 12 weeks, with 0 dietary changes. The walk is doing quiet, compounding metabolic work every single day. Here's your protocol. It's almost insultingly simple. Finish a meal. Wait no more than 30 minutes. Walk for 10 minutes at a comfortable pace. Repeat after lunch. Repeat after dinner. That's it. That's the whole intervention. You don't need a heart rate monitor, a GPS watch, or a single piece of equipment. You can do this in business casual. You can do this completely anonymously, with no one ever knowing you've decided to take your metabolic health seriously. If you want to go deeper, the specific food order that further blunts the spike and the 1 macronutrient timing trick that compounds this effect. That video is queued up right after this one. Hit like if this gave you one concrete thing to act on today. Subscribe if you want the rest of the system built out, step by step. Your blood sugar is spiking 3 times a day, whether you walk or not. The only variable is whether you're doing anything about it.